It is time for the controversial episode of Art Online Alicization. We finally got to see the extent of the Taboo Index and the loopholes around it, as well as the extent of the obedience of the Underworldians, so much so that one of the floodlights collapsed entirely while he was stuck between saving himself, causing harm to another's life, and actually obeying the Taboo Index. Oh, well, we're getting demonetized this week, aren't we? Welcome everyone, this is Art Online Alicization Explained, featuring episode 10 titled Taboo Index and the turning point of the entire Alicization arc. As always, timestamps to individual plot points are in the description as well as the pinned comment for easy navigation, but if you're new to my Alicization Explained series, what I do here is compare the anime to the light novels, fill in the blanks that the anime didn't cover, and provide in-depth explanations where it didn't provide proper context. And well, for the third week in a row, we get a pretty damn faithful adaptation, bar that one moment. Well, episode 10 covered parts 4 and 5 of volume 11 Alicization Turning, except for the final 2-3 pages, which is bound to get mentioned at the very least in the next episode. Minor cuts here and there, but it certainly does not compare to the cut limbs of Humbert and Raios, but keep in mind that you have just over a day to sign up for my Sword Art Online Volume 12 Alicization Rising giveaway. Link for the giveaway is of course in the description, and if you want Goddess of Creation Statia's Blessing, Amazon affiliate links to all available Alicization books are in the description if you want to read them yourself. But without further ado, this week is not a PG episode and revolves around very uncomfortable and controversial topics. So today we're starting off with a warning. If you can't take it, leave it now. If you're here to meme about a topic that you shouldn't be memeing about in the first place, shame on you as a human being, and know that I will be removing joke comments about the topic, as well as, issuing bans to those people. I know most of you guys who have been following me for weeks now won't do that, but I imagine this episode will also attract a different variety of people, so I feel like this warning was warranted. You are welcome to talk about how disgusting of an act it is, you're welcome to criticize it, but I'll be taking action against jokes and memes regarding it. But with that out of the way, the episode begins on the evening of May 23rd in Eugeo and Kirito's room at the dorm during the storm. Novels mention that the storm has arrived on the 22nd, but didn't say what day it was during the day of this incident, and some subtitles wrongly translated as March 23rd. I'm not exactly sure how that is possible when a month is referred to with numbers in the first place, but moving on. Small cuts here and there, Eugeo was actually imagining that the weather was a manifestation of Alice's displeasure regarding the fact that he was taking too long to save her, since back when she was a child she was very skilled at predicting weather patterns a week before a storm, but Eugeo was about to take a huge shortcut towards getting closer to Alice really soon. Also, while polishing their swords, Eugeo asked Kirito if he still did not come up with a name for his sword, as I mentioned back in episode 8, in this world, you were the one to name swords, and so far Kirito was just going on without naming it, calling it the Black One, because he was so used to the idea of the swords coming with their own cool names from all the VR MMOs he had played. Anneal Blade, Elucidator, Dark Repulsor, Excalibur all were automatically named swords by the system. But for the first time, Ronye and Tiese were very late at arriving at their room, and Eugeo and Kirito were getting worried. Kirito decided to look for them while Eugeo remained in the room just in case they returned, and a callback to episode 8, where Kirito was using the window as an entry to the room, claiming it was the fastest way. He once again uses the window to jump out of the room into the dark, stormy evening, because it's simply the fastest way. Soon after, Frenica arrives on Eugeo's door to report Humbert and Raios, and that was when all hell broke loose. Obligatory mention that the title is still beginning, and today it's been confirmed that it wouldn't be changing to anything else during the course of this OP. In fact, we are getting a new opening and ending for the second core. The new opening song is sung by Asuka and is titled Resistor, which is incredibly fitting considering a Kirito quote, which I assume to be in the final episode of the second core. And of course, once we switch to the new opening, another opening explained will follow, so do subscribe and ring the bell icon to not miss that. But the new ending theme features a returning artist to the series as well. Forget Me Not will be performed by Raios, also known as the singing voice of Kanzaki Elsa in Alternative Gun Gale Online series. Back to the anime, however, when heading towards their room, Eugeo was certain that the situation could not have been so severe, as the academy rules for elite disciples stated that the higher law takes precedence, which in this case was the imperial law and the Taboo Index. But he was forgetting one of the higher laws that was mentioned in the previous episode. Eugeo didn't remember it simply because he was not the subject of such a rule as a commoner, but a 5th or 6th rank noble like Tiese and Ronye were subjected to the judicial authority of higher nobles. And as long as they didn't breach the Taboo Index, they were pretty much allowed to do anything. Simply put, they weren't allowed to kill Tiese and Ronye, they weren't allowed to kiss them on the lips, they weren't allowed to drop their life per the Taboo Index, hence why they even bound the girls with stretchy ropes so that it wouldn't drop, but their upcoming actions were not forbidden by the Taboo Index. The index was simply a rule book that was way too specific for its own good, that had plenty of loopholes, as we had seen back in the Zakaria chapter that was cut from the anime. And their long-term plans of getting Eugeo into this situation that he wouldn't be able to prevent was their intention all along, and they had succeeded. Eugeo wanted to shout, but he froze instantly when Raios turned to him, commanding him to stop, because if he continued, he would be breaking the Taboo Index, and nobody could intentionally break the Taboo Index. He had tried all those years ago only to freeze against the judgment of an Integrity Knight. His right eye started twitching. Deep down he claimed he didn't care about the law at this point, but inside his head was the same voice he had heard all those years ago, echoing, generating pain on his right eye. The voice was not his, but it was inside his head. The Axiom Church is absolute. The Taboo Index is absolute. Disobedience is forbidden. It is forbidden to all. Tiese knew it was inevitable. Even at this moment, she tried to ease the pain that was on Eugeo's shoulders as he was frozen by the Taboo Index. To not force Eugeo into a criminal position, she told him not to move, not to do anything. But Eugeo was not listening. His right eye was throbbing uncontrollably, and as he looked at the faces of Raios and Humbert, all he saw was the looks of the primitive goblins they had fought 2 years ago in the End Mountains. Last week, after warning Raios and Humbert, he still believed the words of the Axiom Church that everyone in the land of Statia, the human empire, had to be quote-unquote good, but their face was the final proof that such a thing was not the case. Only one question was in his mind. What purpose could there be in the Taboo Index to allow such actions? A pain jolted through his eyes as he attempted to get up. The church was lying. All humans were not good. Humans existed of both good and evil. Another jolt of pain pinned him back to his knees. Is it an act of goodness to uphold this law? Eugeo had finally managed to stand up again, but a final bolt went through his eye into his brain. He remembered the feeling as his vision turned to red. Something written on his vision in sacred tongue that he couldn't read. System alert, code 871. On the eye that was covered in red, he could see Alice being taken away by the Integrity Knight. On the other side of his vision, however, he was watching Tiese and Ronye being violated by these monsters that were not even criminals as the innocent Tiese and Ronye were according to the twisted rules of this world. The seal on his eye started growing bigger and rotated faster as he started to slit his sword out of his sheath. He shouted with his final breath as the seal gave up and exploded his right eye in that instant, and he initiated the one-hit sword skill horizontal. While Raios saw the light coming and dodged, Humbert was not as lucky and his arm got cut off. Humbert was essentially going crazy due to the loss of blood and life, and Raios was incredibly overjoyed in return. He was expecting to cause Eugeo to be rude at most, so he could use any sort of punishment on him, but now he had a criminal in front of him, a criminal who had just breached the Taboo Index, an enemy of the human empire. But Eugeo was frozen again. Even after breaking the Taboo Index, he could no longer move, not due to a rule mind you, but because of the shock he had just endured. He simply did not have the power anymore. And Raios was now allowed to outright kill him, but his sword met another one, the black one. Raios told Kirito what happened extensively, but Kirito's response was much shorter and heavier. I do not care about your taboos and noble rights. Comparing Raios to the goblins of the Land of Darkness, Raios was first shocked, but suddenly his face turned to thrill, seeing now that he was allowed to use his sword on both Kirito and Eugeo, and started up the High Northian secret technique, the two-handed mountain-splitting wave, but it was unlike the one Volo Levantine used last year that Kirito bested. It was covered in an energy field, and Kirito also did not have an open space to put more power into his skills by taking advantage of leaping moves. He needed a heavier attack to push it back, but both the Blue Rose sword and the black one were only one-handed swords, and Aincrad style also focused on one-handed skills. But Kirito's sword shone once again in bright light and grew ever so slightly, much like that time against Volo. He held his sword in his back with two hands, the same way Sortilina Serlut did, and initiated the Serlut style sword skill Cyclone or Ring Vortex according to Yen Press, the same sword skill Liana had used to best Volo during their graduation duel, as the sword shone a bright green light. The two swords clashed and Tiese Ronye, Humbert and Eugeo watched the sparks fly. Raios was managing to push Kirito down, but Eugeo remembered the exact same scenario. The graduation duel last year between Volo Levantine and Sortilina Serlut. It wasn't just the skill outright defeating Volo Levantine in a showcase of power. In fact, Volo had managed to push Liana to her knees as well. And this detail was omitted from the anime, as I talked about back in my episode 8 explained video, but Liana had learned this from Kirito. They were letting the other overpower them on purpose, and their sword was being pushed back, but that was the intention. The moment the sword was pushed back enough to the starting point of a skill, the sword instantly shone back and launched forward at full power as a brand new skill, effectively overpowering the opposing one who had already exhausted most of its power, resulting in the exact same scene from the graduation duel, with real swords being more effective, that is. But the scene that followed was as good as Higa scene back in episode 6, if not better. Back then, we had seen a Floodlight not being able to come to terms with being a copy, but here Raios' Floodlight was essentially stuck in a paradox. He wanted to prevent his own death, but doing so would either mean getting help from Kirito, a criminal of the Taboo Index mind you, or requesting Humbert to give him the ropes that he was using to save his own life, which would breach the Taboo Index's rule of not causing others to lose life, eventually leading his Floodlight to collapse in an incredibly unnerving manner, the same way 8G-001 had gone down. Humbert ran out shouting murderers, but a familiar face appeared once again from long ago in front of Kirito and Eugeo as they tried comforting Tiese and Ronye. The blue-faced man that looked exactly the same as the one from 8 years ago had just reported them. While Humbert claimed they were murderers, I have to make it very clear that they were not reported for taking Raios' life. As mentioned, Raios' Floodlight had collapsed solely due to his soul being stuck between two priorities. Kirito and Eugeo were only charged with harming life because they effectively had cut off Humbert and Raios' arms. And this is a key detail that'll show up later on, that's why I'm making it very clear here. The next morning, when they woke up in the academy prison room, the scene was a little shortened, but pretty much the same in general in the novels. Miss Azurika was quite intrigued by the duo, as I mentioned back in a cutscene from episode 7, as well as a scene in episode 8 that showcased this specific thing, and she actually did understand where they were coming from. She did not act as if the duo were criminals, despite officially being so according to the Taboo Index. She mentions the eye seal that she had never managed to break, which highlights the fact that she went through similar traumas to actually understand it's not all black and white, and in fact, we will get to see more characters that are having similar dilemmas in the future. But regardless of her fondness of the duo, she had to escort them to the Integrity Knight that arrived to take them to the Axiom Church for their sentencing. In the hall, we can see the same mural that depicts the legend of creation, according to Axiom Church of course, with the three goddesses Solus, Terraria and Stacia in the shadowy part, and the dark god Vecta. The same mural can be seen in the opening as well when we cut to the inside of the top of the Axiom Church, but right below the mural, a familiar face was now waiting for Kirito and Eugeo. The Integrity Knight in golden armor turned around, creating a pure expression of shock in Eugeo's eyes. She introduced herself as Alice Synthesis 30, unaware of the pasts of the duo looking back at her. Alright, time for opinions. Yes, the concepts are controversial, yes, there is blood, I don't care. There is gonna be those handful of jackasses who will claim I condone what was present in the episode, to which I'll just reply with, Do the main characters condone what is happening on screen? Does anybody else who is not Humbert or Raios condone what is happening on the screen? Even Miss Azurika, who is not involved with the situation, is urging Kirito and Eugeo to keep walking in the righteous path against the Axiom Church, the path of the good. I absolutely reject that idiotic claim above that may or may not be presented in the comments. There's nobody here being okay with what transpired in this episode, so let's drop that bullshit right out of the way. Moving on to the actual episode, however, rather than the controversy, the episode was beautifully adapted. Once again, the voice acting and the music was great. However, pay attention to the sounds when Eugeo is attempting to defy the Taboo Index, and you'll hear that they did an amazing job with the sound design in general, just to make you feel more unnerved, you know? The glitch noises essentially give you an idea as to what is going on in Eugeo's mind, as well as when Raios is collapsing. Truly unnerving, and I love it. This episode existed to make you uncomfortable and to turn the story on its head, and it achieved both of those goals. The rest of the arguments are scattered around the video as part of the explanations regarding Humbert and Raios' grand plan of getting punishment rights over Eugeo, so I won't be going down that rabbit hole. But the next episode is titled Central Cathedral, which means we're currently skipping an interlude chapter that takes place in real life. It's very short and will most probably show up later on, combined with other interlude chapters, so for now I won't be mentioning it as well. If it's dropped in the long run, along with other interlude chapters, naturally I'll cover it in a special explained video. But in our current situation, next episode we will be seeing Kirito and Eugeo exploit some mechanics themselves and meet new adversaries, and at this point we're in a place in the story where we are about to get episode after episode fight scenes, bar one exposition episode and possibly one real life episode. It's a very exciting journey ahead of us, and it'll be interesting to see how the animation quality and the budget will hold up to achieve this Herculean task. But if you made it this far into the video and if you have no questions, please do comment System Alert code 871 to show that you made it this far. Again, the giveaway link for Volume 12 Alicization Rising is in the description, and there is only just over a day left to join, along with Amazon affiliate links to all the books that would also support my channel without an additional cost on you. Subscribe and ring the bell for more Sword Art Online Explained. Huge shout out to my patrons as usual, and thank you very much to all of you for watching. I'll see you probably within this week for my journey so far ordinal scale video, considering we are coming to that point where it'll be relevant. Until then, stay cool.